Rain splattered against the wide glass windows of the Harrington estate, blurring the line between the world of wealth inside and the grey storm outside. Inside the mansion, polished marble floors reflected the golden chandeliers. Everything sparkled, except the eyes of the woman silently mopping near the grand staircase. Her name was Ruth. She was the maid, invisible, respectful, and tired. Her hands trembled from years of cleaning the footprints of people who never learned to look down. "Ruth, don't forget to polish the boardroom before the guests arrive," barked Clara Harrington, the millionaire's wife, glancing at her as though she were an extension of the mop itself. "Yes, ma'am," Ruth whispered. But what Clara didn't see was the small figure waiting outside in the rain, a thin boy clutching a torn school bag to his chest. Malik, Ruth's 12-year-old son, stood near the gate, eyes fixed on the mansion that seemed more like another planet. His shoes were soaked through, his lips blue from the cold. Still, he smiled faintly, because today, he'd finally come to see his mother's world, a world he wasn't supposed to belong to. The security guard raised an eyebrow. "What do you want, kid?" "I'm here for my mom," Malik said quietly. "Ruth Johnson. She works here." The guard frowned, but called inside. Minutes later, Ruth appeared at the door, panic and love clashing across her face. "Malik, what are you doing here?" "School ended early," he said softly. "I wanted to walk you home." Before Ruth could respond, another voice sliced through the hall. "Well, what's this?" It was Edward Harrington, the millionaire himself, tall, silver-haired, and smug. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than Ruth's yearly salary. His sharp grey eyes studied Malik with curiosity, then amusement. "Your son?" he asked, glancing at Ruth. She nodded nervously. "He's adorable. You should have told me you had a little genius at home." Ruth blinked, confused by his tone. "He's just a good boy, sir." Edward chuckled, his lips curling. "Good boy? Let's see about that. We're having a little chess gathering tonight. Some investors, some entertainment. Why don't you let your son join? Maybe he can make us all laugh." Ruth froze. "Sir, he doesn't." But Malik interrupted. "I can play." Edward's smirk widened. "Oh, confident, aren't you?" The guests began to arrive, polished shoes, expensive perfumes, laughter that echoed like coins dropping into glass jars. Edward's living room turned into a private theater of wealth and ego. Crystal glasses clinked, and on the center table lay an ornate chessboard carved from ivory and mahogany, a piece that had belonged to Edward's great-grandfather. Malik stood small beside it, rain still drying on his skin. The crowd murmured, some chuckled, others whispered. "Is he really the maid's son?" one woman asked. "Poor boy," another whispered. "He'll embarrass himself." Edward leaned against the piano, wine glass in hand. "All right, little man. Let's make a deal. If you can last 10 moves against me, I'll give your mother a week off, paid." The room erupted in polite laughter. "And if you lose," he smirked, "well, no harm done. It's just a game." Malik met his gaze and said quietly, "It's never just a game, sir." For a moment, the laughter faded. Edward tilted his head, intrigued. "Well, aren't you poetic? Sit down, then." The game began. From the first move, Malik's small hands moved with precision, not hesitance. The pieces clicked softly, rhythmically, as if he was playing to music only he could hear. Edward smirked at first, playing casually. But after the fourth move, his smile stiffened. Malik wasn't fumbling. He was calculating. By the 7th move, Edward leaned forward. By the 9th, the room went silent. Every guest was watching, their amusement turning into disbelief. Malik's bishop slid across the board and trapped Edward's rook in a clean fork. "Impressive," Edward murmured, hiding his surprise. "But you're still not." "Check," Malik said softly. It was the 10th move. A quiet gasp moved through the room. Ruth's heart pounded. She didn't know if she should smile or apologize. Edward leaned back, forcing a chuckle. "Beginner's luck," he said, voice tight. "Let's play another." He couldn't stop himself. Pride was louder than logic. But Malik nodded, calm. "As you wish." The second match began. The boy's eyes, dark, deep, focused, darted across the board faster than Edward could follow. Every move was deliberate. Every pause was a setup. Within minutes, the millionaire's confidence cracked. He tried to joke, to distract. "You sure your mom didn't whisper the moves?" Malik didn't even look up. "You talk too much, sir." Laughter rippled across the room. Not at the boy, but at the man. For the first time, the guests weren't watching a poor boy being humiliated. They were watching power shift in real time. Edward's hand trembled as he moved his queen. Malik stared for a long second, then whispered almost sadly, "You shouldn't have done that." 3 moves later. Checkmate. The room exploded, gasps, whispers, disbelief. Edward Harrington, the man who had once won local chess tournaments for charity, had just been destroyed by a 12-year-old maid's son in under 5 minutes. Ruth stood frozen. Clara, Edward's wife, stared with wide, furious eyes. And Edward, his face turned pale. Malik slowly stood, brushing invisible dust off his shirt. "Thank you for the game," he said simply. "Can my mom still have her week off?" The guests burst into laughter, not mocking, but stunned admiration. Someone clapped. Then another. The sound grew, echoing across the room like thunder. Ruth felt tears sting her eyes. But Edward didn't smile. His jaw clenched. He forced a laugh. "Impressive, kid. Maybe I underestimated you." Malik tilted his head. "Or maybe you underestimated everyone who cleans your floors." The silence that followed was so heavy you could hear the rain outside. Edward said nothing. But in his eyes something shifted, a crack, thin but real. Before anyone could speak, a loud voice came from the doorway. Mr. Collins, one of the investors. "Edward, that boy is something special. You should sponsor his education. Imagine the PR." Edward smiled weakly, his mind racing. The crowd's admiration wasn't for him anymore. It was for Malik. And that he couldn't bear. He looked at Ruth and her son with a cold smile. "Of course. Let's discuss it tomorrow. For now, everyone enjoy yourselves." But Ruth could feel it, the danger in that polite tone. Later that night, when the guests had left and the lights dimmed, Ruth whispered as she held Malik close. "You shouldn't have said those things, baby. Rich people, they don't like being shown up." Malik looked up, calm as ever. "Mom," he laughed at me before the game even started. "I didn't do anything wrong." "No, you didn't," she said softly. "But sometimes being right still gets you hurt." Outside, Edward stood on the balcony, staring into the storm. His reflection in the glass was pale and grim. In the faint thunderlight, he muttered, "No one embarrasses Edward Harrington." The next morning, Malik was gone. If this story moved you, comment your country and city below. We love to see where our amazing viewers are watching from. And if you believe every child deserves a chance, then please, like this video and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Ruth could barely sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Malik sitting across from that arrogant man in the blue suit, his small fingers hovering over the chessboard like a conductor leading an invisible orchestra. He had beaten that man, no, embarrassed him, in front of everyone. But it wasn't pride that filled her chest. It was fear. Fear of what power does to people who have too much of it. The next morning, Malik was already awake, sitting on the floor with the chessboard open again. "Morning, Mama," he said, his smile bright but his eyes distant. "You playin' again already?" she asked, folding her apron. He nodded. "The man said he'd come back. He said he wants me to teach him how I think." Ruth froze. "He said what?" Malik shrugged, pushing a pawn forward like it was nothing. "He said people like me are rare. He said he wants to make me famous." That word, famous, sent a chill down Ruth's spine. She'd heard promises like that before. They always came with a price. Later that day, when she went upstairs to clean the master's study, she overheard hushed voices. "He's gifted," the man said. "I'm not exaggerating. The kid's a prodigy. I want to sponsor him. Get him in tournaments, make him a name." And then came the other voice, cold, sharp, and amused. "The mistress of the house, Mrs. Langford. You want to turn the maid's son into a showpiece? Oh, Richard, that's adorable. Next thing you'll tell me, he's our ticket to a Nobel Prize." Ruth's stomach twisted. She clutched her cleaning rag tighter. But Richard didn't laugh. "Sometimes genius hides where no one looks," he said quietly. "And when it shows up, you don't mock it. You invest in it." That line stuck in her head like a melody. She didn't know if it was genuine or just another power game. That night, a black car pulled up outside their small apartment. 2 men stepped out in suits and handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter on heavy cream paper. "We would like Malik to come to the Langford Chess Foundation's Young Prodigy program. All expenses covered." Her heart skipped a beat. Beneath the letter was a check, for more money than she'd seen in her life. Enough to pay rent for years. "Ma," Malik whispered, standing in the doorway. "We rich now?" Ruth kneeled and cupped his face. "No, baby. We not rich. We just lucky for now." She didn't trust it. Not yet. The next morning, at the grand mansion of the Langfords, Malik walked through a hall lined with gold and portraits of men who'd never worked a day in their lives. The same man in the blue suit smiled when he saw him. "Malik, my boy," he said, arms wide. "You ready to change the world?" Malik nodded shyly, clutching his small wooden pawn like it was a lucky charm. Richard led them into a room filled with cameras, expensive boards, and people in suits whispering into phones. Malik's small face lit up. "This is where you'll play from now on," Richard said. "You'll have tutors, strategy coaches, and sponsors. You're going to make history." Ruth wanted to believe him. But as she looked around the room, she saw too many smiles that didn't reach the eyes. One woman whispered to another, "He's the PR miracle they needed." Finally, something to fix their image after the foundation scandal. Ruth didn't know what scandal they meant, but she knew exploitation when she saw it. During the first televised match, Malik sat calmly in front of a grandmaster twice his age. The crowd laughed when they saw him. A child in a suit 2 sizes too big, sitting cross-legged in a leather chair worth more than his mother's salary. The match started. 10 minutes later, the laughter stopped. Every move Malik made was sharp, clean, terrifyingly precise. When he announced checkmate, the grandmaster blinked, as if he'd just seen a ghost. Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing. "Where did you learn to play like that?" one shouted. Malik looked right into the lens and said, "My mama taught me to think before I move." That line exploded online within hours. The foundation flooded with sponsors. Malik's face was everywhere. But at home, Ruth noticed something strange. Malik wasn't sleeping. He'd stare at the ceiling all night, whispering chess moves under his breath. E4. D5. Knight to F3. One evening, she found him sitting on the floor, staring at the board with tears in his eyes. "They told me to lose, Mama," he said. "What you mean?" "They said it's good for the ratings. Said the next guy's important. Said I should mess up, so the sponsors don't get mad." Ruth felt something snap inside her. She marched straight to the mansion. Past the guards, past the secretaries, into the room where Richard sat with champagne in hand. "You tellin' my boy to throw games?" she demanded. He stood up, eyes cold. "You don't understand how this world works, Miss Ruth. You don't get to dictate terms when opportunity knocks." Ruth glared at him. "Opportunity don't mean nothin' if it kills who you are." But as she turned to leave, Richard's assistant slipped her another envelope. Inside was another check, triple the last one. And a note. "Keep him quiet. Don't ruin what we built." That night, Ruth sat at the kitchen table, staring at the check while Malik slept in the next room. Her hands shook. She could pay every debt she had. Give Malik a future. But at what cost? She ripped the check in half. Then in quarters. The next morning, when Malik woke up, she said, "We're done here, baby. We're going back to our life." He didn't argue. Just nodded, eyes tired but relieved. They packed and left before dawn. But when they reached the gate, flashing lights stopped them. Cameras. Microphones. Reporters. "Ruth, why are you leaving? Is it true the foundation is exploiting your son? Do you have proof?" She froze. How did they know? A figure stepped from the crowd. "Mrs. Langford. You think you can just walk away from this?" she hissed. "We made him." Ruth looked her in the eye and said quietly, "No. I did." The crowd went silent. Mrs. Langford's face twisted in rage. "You'll regret this." Ruth took Malik's hand and kept walking. As they disappeared down the street, Richard stood on the mansion steps, watching them go. His phone buzzed. A notification popped up. #Malik the Prodigy trending worldwide. He scrolled down, expecting praise. But instead, he saw something else. A leaked video. Him telling Ruth to keep the boy quiet. And the voice recording ended with Ruth saying, "Opportunity don't mean nothin' if it kills who you are." The comments below were brutal. "Fire him. Cancel the foundation. Give the boy his freedom." Richard sank into a chair, face pale. Meanwhile, Ruth and Malik sat on a park bench, the city lights glowing like stars. Malik smiled. "Mama, can I still play chess?" She kissed his forehead. "You can play anything you want, baby. Long as you play for yourself." He smiled wider. "Then I'm already winning. And for the first time in years, Ruth believed him. But then, as they sat there, a black car pulled up again. The door opened. And this time, a familiar voice said softly, "Mrs. Ruth, I think we owe you an apology." She turned slowly. It was a new man, calm, kind eyes, a badge that said Federal Ethics Commission. "Ma'am," he said, "we've been investigating the Langford Foundation for months. And your son just helped us expose them." Ruth blinked. "You mean?" He smiled. "Let's just say, your boy didn't just win a chess game. He changed the whole board." As the car drove off, Malik looked at his mother and whispered, "Checkmate, Mama." The screen fades to black. Then a gentle voiceover. "Sometimes the smallest move can change everything." If you believe every child deserves a chance, like and subscribe, and comment your country and city below. Let's see how far this story travels. 3 days after they left the mansion, Ruth thought the chaos was finally behind them. Malik was smiling again, back in his small room, tapping chess pieces on the floor and humming quietly. The world seemed to be moving on. News channels stopped calling, the online storm faded, and for a brief, fragile moment peace settled in. Then, at 3 a.m., someone knocked on their door. Ruth jolted awake. Her heart pounded. She walked quietly to the door, clutching the handle. "Who is it?" she whispered. "It's Officer Grant," a voice said calmly. She opened the door a few inches, and saw a man in a dark suit holding a badge. His tone was respectful, but heavy. "Ma'am, we need to ask you and your son a few questions. It's about the Langford Foundation." Her stomach twisted. "Questions about what?" He hesitated. "There are financial irregularities. Your son's name came up." She frowned. "Malik's 8 years old. He don't even know how to spell financial irregularities." Grant's lips twitched, almost smiling. "That's what makes it interesting." Behind her, Malik peeked out, sleepy-eyed, holding his small wooden pawn. Grant knelt down to his level. "Hey champ, mind if I ask, when you were playing those games at the mansion, did anyone tell you what to do with the chessboard on the computer?" Malik nodded slowly. "They told me to press buttons when the light turned green." Grant's expression hardened. "Green lights, huh?" Ruth crossed her arms. "What's that mean?" Grant looked up at her. "Ma'am, I think your son might have been unknowingly helping them move money through encrypted software disguised as chess data." The words hit like ice water. "What do you mean move money?" she whispered. "Money laundering, ma'am. Big money." Ruth stumbled back, hand over her mouth. "You tellin' me my baby?" Grant shook his head. "No, he didn't do anything wrong. But his matches might have been part of the scheme. We need his help to prove it." For a moment, everything was silent except the sound of Malik's small fingers tapping the pawn on the table. He looked up at his mother. "Mama, did I do something bad?" She knelt beside him, voice trembling but firm. "No, baby. You did something brave. You told the truth." Grant handed her a card. "We'll protect both of you, but we'll need you to come with us." That night, they rode in silence through the city. Malik stared out the window as lights blurred past. Ruth sat stiff, holding his hand tight. When they reached the government office, the air felt colder, sharper. Computers hummed. Agents whispered. "Mrs. Ruth," Grant said, motioning them to a seat. "We think the Langfords used your son's matches to hide transactions. Every move on the digital board triggered code that transferred money. We need Malik to show us exactly how he played." Malik blinked. "So my games were real and fake?" Grant nodded. "Exactly." They sat him at a computer. Malik stared at the digital board for a moment. Then his fingers began to fly. Click. Move. Pause. Click. The screen filled with numbers and graphs. Within minutes, he had traced patterns that left the tech agents speechless. "How is he doing that?" one whispered. "He's following logic," another said softly. "He's seeing moves in code." Ruth couldn't understand any of it. She just watched her son, the little boy everyone mocked, command a room full of experts like it was his stage. But then the screen flashed red. "Warning, access denied." Grant frowned. "What's happening?" Malik bit his lip. "Someone's blocking me." Suddenly, the lights flickered. The power surged. Grant's phone buzzed. A message appeared. "Tell the maid to stop, or she'll lose more than her job." Ruth saw it over his shoulder and went cold. "They know we here." Grant slammed his phone on the table. "We're moving you both. Right now." They were rushed to a safe house, a small, dim apartment far from the city center. Ruth could feel the tension in every breath. Malik tried to act brave, but that night she found him sitting awake again, eyes wet. "Mama," he whispered. "They said I helped bad people." She sat on the bed beside him, brushing his curls gently. "Baby, you didn't help bad people. You just showed the truth. Sometimes that's what scares them most." He looked up at her. "Then why they want to hurt us?" Her voice broke. "'Cause truth don't make friends easy, Malik. But it make history." The next morning, Grant returned, looking exhausted but determined. "We've got a break." We traced a pattern from Malik's last match. It leads to a shell company in Zurich, registered to someone named Langford International Holdings. Ruth frowned. "Langford, as in Richard Langford?" Grant nodded. "And his wife." But then he hesitated. "And one more name. Someone we didn't expect." He handed Ruth a folder. Inside was a signature she recognized immediately, written in soft, elegant handwriting. Ruth Langford. Her stomach dropped. That ain't me, she said, panicked. Grant nodded. We know. They used your name to sign off their fake charity accounts. They made you the scapegoat. Ruth's voice cracked. They used me and my boy. Grant clenched his jaw. We'll clear your name. But we'll need your help, and Malik's. There's one last file, hidden in the Foundation's private system. Only your son can find it. Ruth turned to Malik. You up for this, baby? He nodded, eyes suddenly fierce. They played dirty, Mama. Now I play smarter. That night, Malik sat again before the glowing screen, face calm, fingers steady. The hum of the computer was the only sound in the room. Then click by click, he entered the virtual chessboard, the one that hid their crimes. Every move opened a folder. Every pawn became a key. His small brow furrowed in concentration. Almost there, he murmured. Grant leaned forward. Careful, kid. Malik didn't answer. He made one final move, bishop to h7. The board froze. Then, one by one, files appeared. Bank accounts. Offshore transfers. Hidden donations. Got it, he whispered. Grant exhaled. We got them. But before they could celebrate, the door to the safe house burst open. Armed men in black stormed in, shouting. FBI! Hands up! Ruth screamed. Grant raised his badge. Wait, we're the good guys. But something was wrong. The men didn't have real badges. Malik grabbed the pawn and held it tight as one of the men yanked Ruth away. Take the boy, one shouted. He's the key. And then blackout. The screen fades. Hook for the next part. When Malik wakes up, he's somewhere else. Not the safe house, not his home, but inside the Langford mansion again. Only this time, the game is for his life. The crowd in the hall was frozen. Not by fear, but by awe. The little boy everyone had mocked now stood on the podium, holding the shining golden trophy, his trembling fingers reflecting the light of victory. Evelyn's eyes, once sharp with arrogance, now glistened with disbelief. The room erupted in applause, people chanting, Liam! 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 Cameras flashed, reporters surged forward, microphones thrust toward his small, determined face. The billionaire, Richard, stood speechless, his chest heavy with emotion. He had once doubted this boy, humiliated his mother, and turned genius into a joke. But now, as he watched Liam lift the trophy, something inside him cracked. Something deeper than pride. It was guilt. When the applause died down, Liam stepped down from the stage, clutching his trophy like it was the most fragile thing in the world. He walked past Evelyn, who stood frozen, her lips quivering. For the first time in her life, she had no words. Liam looked up at her, his voice steady yet soft. You said I didn't belong here, he whispered, eyes burning with innocence and fire. But the board doesn't care where I came from. Only how I move. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Evelyn blinked rapidly, as if trying to erase his words, but they stuck to her soul like scars. From behind her, the crowd began to cheer again. But this time, they weren't clapping for money, status, or power. They were clapping for truth. For brilliance that no title could suppress. Liam's mother, Grace, ran forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. She threw her arms around her son, sobbing uncontrollably. You did it, baby, she whispered. You showed them who you are. Richard stepped closer, guilt painting every line on his face. His voice trembled. Grace. Liam. I owe you both an apology. I thought I could buy everything. Respect, intelligence, love. But your son just proved. Those things are born in the soul, not the wallet. Grace didn't answer. She just looked at him, long and cold. Years of humiliation, pain, and silence swirled behind her eyes. You can't buy back what you broke, she said softly. But maybe, you can change what you build next. Richard swallowed hard. Let me make it right, he said, turning to the crowd. From this day, I'm establishing the Liam Foundation, a scholarship program for underprivileged children with exceptional minds. No child will be ignored because of who their parents are. The hall erupted once more. Flashbulbs burst. Reporters cried. Even Evelyn turned her face away, ashamed of the girl she'd been. Later that night, as Grace and Liam left the venue, they walked past the mansion gates where once they were not welcome. The same guard who had sneered at them now opened the door with trembling respect. But Liam didn't even glance back. His eyes were fixed ahead, toward the skyline, where dreams didn't ask for permission. At the car, Grace crouched down and held his shoulders. You know, baby, she said softly, you didn't just win a trophy tonight. You won freedom. For both of us. Liam smiled faintly. I didn't play for them, Mama. I played for you. Her tears fell silently. She hugged him tighter than she ever had before. And then, a familiar voice called from behind. Evelyn. She stepped closer, holding out something, a small, hand-carved chess piece. A pawn painted gold. I don't expect forgiveness, she said quietly. But I wanted you to have this. You turned what everyone thought was a pawn into a king. Liam looked at her, then at the piece, and after a moment of silence nodded. Thank you. Evelyn smiled faintly, her voice breaking. Thank you, for showing me what real strength looks like. As they drove away, Grace looked out the window, her son's trophy glittering in the moonlight. The city lights blurred, but her heart was clear for the first time in years. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something greater. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers through the hands of a child who refuses to give up. And that whisper echoed around the world. If you believe true genius comes from the heart, not the wallet, drop a red heart in the comments. Like if you believe every child deserves a chance. And subscribe if you want to see more stories that prove kindness always wins.